Hi, I'm Arlena. My family told me Grandma left me nothing, just an old rusted keychain. They laughed, said it was symbolic, said I'd always been too sentimental. But what if that keychain wasn't junk? What if it opened something they were never supposed to see? They got the house, the jewelry, the praise. I got silence, and a code from Switzerland burned into steel. Now they're calling me unstable. But the deeper I dig, the more I wonder. Was this about inheritance? Or was it about hiding something much bigger? Would you trust a family that edits you out of the photos, then tries to erase you from the will? I should have known better the moment I pulled into my mother's driveway. The autumn leaves crackled under my boots, dry and indifferent, like the voices I was about to face. Colorado Springs was never home, just the zip code where my family chose to pretend they still had one. Inside, the house felt colder than the weather. It was the smell: overcleaned wood floors, citrus spray on leather couches, and burnt coffee lingering like an afterthought. That smell always meant something formal was happening, something you couldn't escape from. The reading of Grandma Marguerite's will was scheduled like a family brunch nobody wanted to host. Vera sat in her usual throne-like chair, spine stiff as ever, next to Callista, whose smile was a little too polished for grief. Ronan leaned against the fireplace, flipping through something on his phone. The lawyer, a wiry man with tired eyes, stood at the center of the room like he was auctioning off memories. He began with his usual preamble, the kind you tune out when you already know the story won't favor you. Callista got the jewelry. Ronan received a chunk of Marguerite's long-held stock portfolio. Vera took ownership of the house. And then came mine. The lawyer paused like he'd found a typo. To Arlena, my love, my clarity, I leave this. He reached into a small envelope and pulled out a rusted keychain. Just that. No note, no explanation. An old keychain? Callista said, half laughing, half pitying. Is this symbolic, or did the lawyer run out of envelopes? The room erupted. Not cruel laughter, worse. Dismissive. The kind that makes you feel like a side note to a joke you weren't invited to hear. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I took the keychain and slipped it into my pocket. The metal felt warm against my palm, like it had something to say if only people would stop talking. While they toasted themselves and traded stories about who would renovate what, I stared around the room and memorized everything. The tilt of Ronan's head when he smirked, the way Vera nodded like she'd predicted this, the way nobody looked at me directly. They think I'm invisible, I thought. So let's see what invisibility gives me access to. It wasn't sadness, not even rage. It was something colder, cleaner. The will closed out. Chairs scraped against tile. Wine glasses clinked. I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of needing water. Really, I just needed a breath that didn't taste like someone else's entitlement. From the hallway, I heard the shutter click. Back in the living room, they were posing for what they called a legacy photo. Everyone stood shoulder to shoulder, Callista in the center, holding Grandma's necklace like it was some generational trophy. I stood behind the kitchen doorway, out of frame, watching them record their version of history. The photo printed later that evening. A framed copy went on the mantel before I'd even left the house. I wasn't in it. Of course I wasn't. It's cleaner this way, Vera said. Not with malice, just certainty, like she'd already explained it to herself a dozen times and decided that was enough. I left without saying goodbye. The keychain felt heavier now, like it had absorbed the room's weight and was storing it for later. The front door clicked behind me like a verdict. I sat in my car for a long time before turning the key. My phone lit up with a message from over a year ago. It was Grandma. You won't always be invited to the photo, my love, but one day they'll beg to be part of yours. I stared at that message until the words blurred. Not from tears. Those had dried out years ago. And then came the moment they laughed again. This time over brunch, mocking a tuition payment I'd made years ago. The air was dry and restless that morning, like it knew the tension gathering under Vera's backyard canopy. Folding tables lined the garden, draped in floral plastic, weighed down by finger sandwiches and lemonade that tasted like watered-down memory. Everything was pleasant in that artificial way my mother preferred. Hosted just right. Conversation kept light, and truth kept out of reach. Callista's voice was the first thing I heard when I stepped onto the patio. "Let's be honest," she was telling Ronan and two women from the neighborhood. "Grandma just didn't want drama. She knew who was dependable." I didn't react. I took a seat near the edge of the crowd, close enough to hear, but far enough not to be roped into the family performance. Moments later, Ronan pulled into the driveway. He stepped out of his Lexus, sunglasses on, holding his daughter's hand with one arm and his mimosa in the other. As he walked past, I caught a glimpse of something swinging from his ignition key. It was the keychain, the same rusted thing that had been handed to me like a consolation prize yesterday. Now it hung from Ronan's car, like a joke he thought nobody would get, except the ones who were in on it. "She got a keychain," he called out, raising his glass. "Better than socks, right?" The group around him laughed. It wasn't the loud, performative laughter of yesterday. It was lighter, more careless, and that made it worse. They'd already forgotten it wasn't theirs to mock. I kept my eyes on the keychain, watching it sway slightly under the breeze. That little piece of metal used to hang from the latch on Grandma's garden shed. I remembered it vividly. She used to lock up her gardening tools with it, said it had traveled with her since Geneva. Nobody else remembered that. Or if they did, they didn't care. No one noticed me looking. They were too busy sipping, gossiping, and rearranging their own versions of the truth. Callista turned toward the crowd again, her voice rising with a practiced ease. "Remember when Ronan had to drop out of business school? Poor guy. Grandma gave the college fund to Arlena instead, said she was the planner in the family." More laughter. Someone actually clapped. My spine didn't stiffen, my face didn't change. But inside, something calcified. That story wasn't just false, it was a knife disguised as family memory. What actually happened? Ronan crashed his car drunk during winter break. Instead of calling our parents, he called me. I paid for the towing, the repairs, and signed off on using my own housing stipend to cover it so he wouldn't get expelled. Grandma found out months later and quietly reimbursed me. No fanfare, no tale told over lemonade. I chewed the inside of my cheek and stood up slowly, excusing myself from the brunch with a nod I didn't mean. I walked around the side of the house and got into my car, letting the AC blast away the heat that had been clinging to my skin since that toast. Back home, I opened the file box from my grad school days. It took me a minute to find it. The folder marked 2009, loan plus fees. Inside was the tuition receipt, and behind it, a note from Grandma on her lilac stationery. "For the things you sacrificed so others didn't fall." I held it between my fingers for a long time. That sentence, short, quiet, knowing, sounded more like her than any eulogy spoken that week. That laughter at brunch didn't echo anymore. It reformed itself into something sharper. It didn't sting. It steeled. I reached into my purse and pulled out the keychain again. Under better light, I noticed something odd. The engraving wasn't decorative. It was precise, mechanical. There were tiny markings, not just scratches from use, almost like coordinates, or a code. I pulled up a search bar on my laptop and typed in the first few digits. The page lagged, loading slowly, but the top result caught my eye. Banque Suisse de Commerce, Geneva. That name rang in my ears like a song I hadn't heard since childhood. BSC. Grandma used to whisper it whenever we played alphabet games. B for bank, she'd tease. I always thought she was joking. My phone buzzed before the page could finish loading. A message from an unknown number. "You don't know what you're holding. Don't tell anyone yet." I didn't respond to the message right away. I stared at it for a good 10 minutes, letting the words sit with me in the dark. "You don't know what you're holding." I hadn't even told anyone I still had the keychain, hadn't mentioned it to a soul. Whoever sent it either guessed right or knew too much. I got up from the couch, locked every door and window, and turned off the living room lights. My apartment sank into stillness. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator, and even that felt louder than it should. I went to the hallway closet and pulled down the box labeled M. Chen Personal. It had been gathering dust for 3 years. I hadn't opened it since the day I packed up Grandma's room. Inside, tucked beneath folded scarves and brittle photo albums, was a leather-bound notebook the color of dried tobacco. I didn't remember ever seeing it before. The initials on the front were faint, almost invisible unless you angled it just right under the light. BSC. My fingers tingled as I opened the cover. The first few pages were dates and locations: Switzerland, France, some city names I couldn't pronounce. Then came symbols, hand-sketched diagrams that looked like key parts, old currency notations, and what I recognized as ledger entries, all written in tight French script. A few were circled in red pencil. One page in particular caught my breath. Banque Suisse de Commerce, underlined twice. Below it, a phrase in English. Private accounts require personal validation. See, engraved proxy access protocol. Proxy, validation. That matched the structure etched onto the keychain. It wasn't just metal, it was access. I kept flipping through the notebook, my heartbeat catching with each turn. One folded sheet had been taped inside the back cover. On it was a dried violet flower, pressed flat like she'd done it intentionally. Beside it, in Grandma's handwriting, "If you're reading this, you passed test 1. But the account isn't the only secret they'll try to steal." The air shifted in the room. Not colder, just clearer. I knew then she had left more than money. She'd left intent, direction. My mind darted backward to a long-forgotten afternoon in her garden. I was 17. A scholarship I'd earned had slipped away because of an administrative error no one could fix. I was humiliated and too proud to cry. Grandma had handed me a glass of lemonade and sat beside me, her gloves still covered in dirt. "They'll question everything they think they know about you," she said, as if she had seen the next 10 years coming. "But don't worry, I already wrote the ending." I hadn't understood what she meant back then. Now I did. She had been preparing me, not consoling me. It wasn't punishment, it was calibration. I scanned every page of the notebook and saved them to an encrypted folder. I printed out the ones with codes and underlined passages, labeling them in sequence. Then I started a list on my laptop, each item a step forward. Identify account verification protocol. Trace any banking records tied to her foreign addresses. Establish legal access before the rest of the family suspects a thing. I wasn't just preserving her legacy. I was defending it. I was about to close the notebook when I felt something odd under the back flap. A crease in the leather revealed a small slit, and tucked into it, a paper slip no wider than a movie ticket. Typed, not handwritten. A line of characters, followed by a warning. CH, BSC, VP 09, 1973, AR 003. Discretion required. Misuse may lead to federal inquiry. I stared at the string of letters and numbers. AR, my initials. Just as I pressed the notebook shut, the building's intercom buzzed sharply through the silence. The clock on my stove read 1:37 a.m. I didn't move. I waited for the second buzz. But it never came. I stood motionless, the air around me thick with silence. The intercom buzz hadn't come again, but its echo sat in my chest like a held breath. I walked slowly to the peephole, checked the hallway. Nothing. No footsteps, no shadows. Just the low hum of the elevator several floors down. Whoever it was didn't wait long. I slid the chain lock across the door and turned back toward my desk. The notebook still lay open, the dried violet tucked like a sentinel between warnings and codes. Something in the texture of the pages nagged at me. I turned them over carefully, this time checking the seams, the edges, the binding. That's when I found it. A card, thin, cream-colored, its corners yellowing slightly, pressed flat behind the last page. I pulled it free. On the front, in small serifed print, Julien de Rousseau, Independent Consultant, GVA, Geneva. The initials hit me like a whisper from the grave. I flipped the card. 3 handwritten letters stared back at me. EPA Energy, Property, Access. That was Grandma's system. She never labeled anything directly. Even her tax folders used code, like she expected to be audited by people who had no business understanding her. EPA meant this man, Julian, was linked to something she considered all 3. I typed the email address listed on the card into a blank message. I didn't say much, just a line. This is Arlena. If you worked with Marguerite Chen, I believe I've found something she intended for me. I attached a low-res scan of the notebook cover and clicked send. The reply came within minutes, but not from him. It was an auto-response, written in French, which I translated roughly online. This channel is no longer secure. All inquiries must be directed through private courier or P.O. box. No exceptions. Not hostile, but definitely guarded. Either Julian didn't want to be found, or someone didn't want me finding him. The next morning, I skipped coffee and walked across town to the engineering building at the university. I hadn't stepped foot on that campus in years. I still remembered where Dr. Henry's office was. 4th floor, back corner. He'd been one of the few professors who didn't treat me like background noise when I was earning my degree. He answered the door with a puzzled smile. Arlena Chen? Wow, you've grown into the suit version of the student who always asked the hard questions. I smiled back, holding up the keychain. Think you can help me dissect a mystery? Inside his lab, surrounded by 3D printers and old circuit boards, he studied the object like it was a puzzle box. He held it under a fluorescent lens, tilted it, tapped lightly at the edges. This isn't decorative, he said, eyes narrowing. This steel is engineered to resist corrosion, but it's also hollow. Something's embedded. Mind if I run a scan? He ran it through a desktop imaging unit. A few moments later, we stared at a screen that showed a tiny internal chip, laser-etched, precise. It's not for tracking, too old for that. But this, he pointed at the string of letters. This is a unique identifier, serial pattern, Swiss format. You don't hide steel like this unless you're hiding something big. The string appeared on screen. CH, BSC, VP 09, 1973, AR 003. I didn't need his help deciphering it. CH, Switzerland. BSC, Banque Suisse de Commerce. VP, probably internal account classification. 1973, the year something started. AR 003, Arlena. Me? The third access point? I felt cold, but not afraid. Not anymore. All that laughter over the keychain, all that smug dismissal. They had no idea they'd mocked the door to something none of them were meant to touch. They laughed at the rust, I murmured. They never saw the engineering. Dr. Henry looked up. Whatever this is, it's more than inheritance. Yeah, I said. It's structure, it's a map. Back home, I sat at my desk and opened a blank note file. I titled it, Julian, Access Plan. Then I typed, if this reaches you, I'm her, I have the code, and I remember what she taught me. I was just about to encrypt the message and hit send when my laptop screen flickered. A red bar crossed the top of my browser. Message intercepted. This channel is no longer secure. My phone buzzed instantly. Unknown number again. If you want to live, don't send that message yet. I didn't sleep that night. I laid on the couch with the notebook beside me. The message from that anonymous number pulsing in my brain like a second heartbeat. If you want to live, don't send that message yet. Not exactly bedtime reading. By mid-morning, I couldn't sit still. My body moved before I made any decision. I threw on jeans, grabbed the keychain, and drove across town toward a place I hadn't been in years. A dusty old thrift store tucked between a closed-down pharmacy and a vape shop on South Gaylord Street. Grandma used to drop off books there. I remembered because I always hated the smell, old paper and burnt air freshener. Inside, nothing had changed. The same green shag rug, the same mannequin missing a hand. The woman at the register had a voice that rasped like she'd smoked every day since Clinton was in office. Looking for anything in particular? She asked, barely looking up from her Sudoku book. Just browsing, I said. But my eyes weren't casual. I moved through the shelves with purpose, scanning for something wrapped in floral cloth. I didn't know what exactly I was hoping to find, but I trusted instinct now more than plans. Near the back, in a bin of outdated calendars and cookbooks, I saw it. Tucked awkwardly between a torn dictionary and a VHS tape of a Billy Graham sermon. A bundle wrapped in faded cotton, tied with blue string. I brought it to the counter. The woman barely blinked. Lady came in maybe 2 months back, dropped off a whole crate, said it was from someone who wouldn't need it anymore. This was the only thing I didn't put out till now. I paid cash. At home, I untied the bundle like I was defusing a bomb. Inside was a scarf I hadn't seen since high school. Grandma used to wear it every spring. Beneath it, a small journal, edges weathered but clean. But not whole. Pages had been sliced out, not torn, cut, precision like a scalpel. Whoever had taken them knew exactly what they didn't want found. There was one black and white photo left inside, Grandma, standing outside what looked like a stone building in Europe, wearing the scarf that now lay in my lap. Her smile was familiar but reserved, as if she already knew not everyone in her bloodline would deserve the story. I flipped through the remaining pages. Receipts, notes scribbled in margins, phrases underlined twice. But the rhythm of it was broken. Someone had interrupted it. Callista. It was her style. Remove the piece. Retell the truth. I didn't cry. Didn't pace. I took out my phone, photographed every page, and saved it to my encrypted drive. Then I labeled the folder. Memory tampering, Exhibit A. Silence isn't weakness, it's storage, and I was full. That afternoon, I got a text from Vera. Can you stop by today? Just the two of us, no drama. Against my better judgment, I went. Her house was silent when I arrived. No classical music. No candle scents to cover whatever emotions she didn't want aired. Just the ticking clock in the hallway, counting something invisible. She was in the living room, already seated with a glass of water and a small envelope on the table. Her expression didn't shift when I walked in. I know things feel messy, she began, tone clipped. But your grandmother, she never wanted this to become a spectacle. I didn't respond. She pushed the envelope toward me. This might help. Consider it closure. I opened it, a check, $15,000. Her name signed at the bottom in smooth, practiced penmanship. I folded it slowly and slid it back across the table. You're offering silence, but I was never loud. Vera looked tired, not guilty. I just want this to stay peaceful. I stood. So did Grandma. That's why she planned for noise. I left the house without another word. That was the first time I walked away from Vera without permission, and I didn't look back. At home, I scanned the check, logged it as attempted financial suppression, layer 1, and dropped it in the shredder. I poured myself tea, pulled up the store's transaction log online, and began cross-checking credit card purchases around the day that bundle was dropped off. There was one name I didn't expect, but should have. Miller & Grant LLP, Ronan's law firm. If he was buying up fragments of Grandma's legacy, this wasn't about sentiment. It was strategy, and I needed a sharper one. 3 days passed before the next invitation arrived. Ronan's daughter was turning 8, and apparently, even family fractures didn't exclude birthday parties. The group text came in with a confetti emoji and Callista's chirpy, "Everyone's invited. Let's keep it simple and joyful." I wasn't naive. That wasn't an invitation. It was bait. Still, I accepted. I showed up with a gift card tucked inside a hand-drawn card and wore neutral colors, a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and the calm of someone who knew exactly what she was walking into. I wasn't there for cake. I was there for proof. The party was in Ronan's backyard, the kind of neighborhood where every blade of grass looks manicured by professionals and nobody parks on the street. The patio was decorated with rainbow streamers, a rented balloon arch, and 2 folding tables filled with catered snacks and juice boxes. I hovered at the edge of conversations, catching pieces of laughter, clinking glasses, and the occasional sideways glance. Callista held court near the gift table, basking in attention like it was oxygen. Ronan played the doting father, high-fiving kids, making jokes that weren't funny, but earned polite chuckles from every adult in earshot. Vera? She was by the lemonade pitcher, managing the crowd like a church potluck. I stayed in the periphery, camera ready, but out of frame, just the way they liked it. Near the end of the afternoon, one of the parents pulled out their phone and called everyone in for a group photo. I stood nearby, assuming I'd be part of it. "Let's get just the family for this one," Callista chirped. Ronan stepped forward, raised a hand discreetly in my direction, and mouthed something to the photographer. She nodded. Everyone lined up. I didn't move. "Arlena, can you help grab the extra chair from the garage?" Ronan asked, his voice smooth. There it was. The gentle nudge out of frame. I nodded once, turned, and walked off. No one called me back. Later that night, I checked the shared family drive out of curiosity. The video had already been uploaded. Party recap. I hit play and watched. They'd cut me out entirely. Even moments when I'd been nearby were cropped, blurred, or transitioned around. During the toast, I caught the edge of Ronan's hand gesture, just enough movement to make sure I wasn't blocking anyone's shot. And then Callista, mid-smirk, glancing at me, and then away, satisfied. It wasn't just about excluding me, it was performance. Deliberate, controlled, orchestrated. I time-stamped the footage, downloaded it, and filed it in my encrypted archive under pattern documentation, subtle exclusion. That night, I parked my car at the edge of the lot behind the venue and sat in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat still enough to hear my own pulse settle. That's when I heard a knock on the driver's window. I turned, startled, until I saw Claire, an old classmate from college. She worked as a legal assistant now. We'd crossed paths briefly at a conference 2 years back. She smiled awkwardly and motioned for me to roll the window down. "You got a minute?" she asked. I stepped out of the car, and we leaned against the hood in the cooling dusk air. "I debated whether to say anything," Claire began. "But I saw your sister's name on a financial document at my firm last year." I didn't flinch. "What kind of document?" "Loan application, big amount. It flagged internally because the name used for asset leverage was your grandmother's, and the listed executor? Callista Chen." I blinked. "She filed as executor before Marguerite even passed?" Claire nodded. "She claimed it was pre-authorized estate planning, said your grandmother wanted her to take over all legacy assets, but the file raised enough red flags that we paused it, triggered an audit. She withdrew the request before it went to compliance." I stared ahead at nothing. "Did anyone else see it?" "I can get a copy, but off the record." "That'll do," I said. Claire hesitated. "I can also write up a brief statement. Document what I saw, where it was, when it happened. You can decide what to do with it." It wasn't just personal anymore. This wasn't about family roles or feelings. It was fraud. Intentional. Organized. "I'd appreciate that," I said. "More than you know." When I got home, I added Claire's name to the archive, created a new folder, Pre-Death Misrepresentation, Primary Actors. Then I sat at my desk and opened the notebook again, scanning for any phrase, any date, anything that matched Callista's activity. Nothing matched. That was the point. Callista had rewritten her version of events. Marguerite's legacy was her playground now, at least in her mind. I opened a secure email draft and addressed it to the banking contact in Geneva, requesting formal procedural clarification regarding legacy fraud mitigation protocols. This wasn't just a grudge. This was a chain of command, and I wasn't at the end of it. I was the fulcrum. A ping sounded on my screen. It was Claire again. "Also, someone just tried to pull your grandmother's inquiry file through a private account. It was blocked, but the name used? Ronan's assistant. Claire's message hit like a slap without a sound. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, tracing the crown molding as if it could tell me what to do next. Ronan didn't use his name. He used his assistant's. Cowardice dressed up as delegation. My name, my legacy, quietly chipped away by people who once ate birthday cake with me on picnic benches. People who had kissed my forehead at graduation. Now they were fabricating paperwork in my name. 3 days later, I was still collecting myself when Geneva replied. There have been 3 unauthorized attempts to access legacy account files using alternative identification. The most recent request used your full legal name, submitted through a law firm based in Colorado. Attached, please find the scanned authorization form. I opened the attachment. The letterhead read Miller and Grant LLP, Ronan's firm. The signature beneath it was mine, except it wasn't. The loop in the R was wrong, the spacing too mechanical, no soul in the ink. I zoomed in, breathing slow, controlled. Not mine. I called Mr. Hayes, a notary my family had used for years, and asked if he'd ever validated anything on behalf of my estate. His laugh on the other end was short. No, ma'am, and if someone said I did, you tell them they can bring it to court? I thanked him and hung up, hand steady, mind sharper than it had felt in weeks. They thought they were slipping things past me. They didn't understand that growing up with people who rewrite stories mid-sentence had trained me to see the edits. I began drafting a certified fraud report. No accusations, just documentation. Just the facts, lined up like bricks in a courtroom wall. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to make sure everything was in order before they knocked on a judge's door. Then, as I was finalizing the file, my email watchdog software pinged again. New alert. Suspicious redirect attempt. IP traced to Klein & Richter LLC. Not Ronan's firm. I Googled them. Boutique estate litigation firm, known for repositioning legacy wealth flow in high-conflict families. In other words, they made it their business to help people hijack inheritances legally. So that's what this was. This wasn't about a misunderstanding or family hurt feelings. This wasn't about who visited grandma most or who made sacrifices or who showed up when no one else did. This was about money. It always had been. I shut my laptop, grabbed my bag, and drove straight to the bank. No appointment, no hesitation. Once inside, I walked directly to the private client desk and asked to speak to a manager. When he came out, I didn't waste time. I need a lock placed on any current or pending international access attempts related to the following family names. I listed them. Calm, clear. I handed him a notarized affidavit I'd pre-written that morning. Ongoing legal interference. I'm requesting protective hold procedures in accordance with Estate Safeguarding Policy 12B. He looked it over, nodded once, and said, "We'll confirm by end of day. Anything else?" Yes. Document who requests what, when, and how. Every detail. I want the audit trail live. Outside, I paused on the steps, phone buzzing in my pocket. I pulled it out slowly, already knowing what I'd see before the screen lit up. New message. You've made your move, so will we. Attached was a screenshot of a group chat. Names I recognized. My mother, Ronan, Callista. Message from Ronan. We move forward next week. She's spiraling. Shouldn't be hard to get a psychological statement in place. Callista replied, She's already acting unstable. You saw the way she talked to Mom. It's not hard to paint that picture. And from Vera, if we position this as concern for her well-being, no one will question our intentions. We're just trying to protect her. They weren't coming for my assets. They were coming for my credibility. I barely slept the night before the memorial. My mind moved like a chessboard under floodlight, every square lit, every piece alive. I'd read their group chat 27 times. It didn't make it less cruel, just less surprising. If they wanted to label me unstable, they'd have to spell it correctly under oath. The community center was already humming with people by the time I arrived. Callista had arranged everything, tastefully as always. white tablecloths, eucalyptus centerpieces, a slideshow looping on silent on the wall. A table of framed photos sat near the entrance, all carefully curated. Not one included me. Marguerite and Callista in the garden, Ronan and Grandma by the fireplace, even a black and white one from decades ago, Grandma with her sisters, but not one of her with me. I didn't ask why. I just took it in. People were already filling their seats, chatting softly, adjusting their coats in the fold-out chairs. I walked slowly toward the front, claimed a seat in the second row, close enough to see their expressions, far enough to remain unspoken. Vera approached the podium first. She adjusted the mic, clasped her hands gently. "My mother loved peace," she began, "and she believed in harmony. That's what this evening is about, remembering the unity she valued so much." I felt the word stick in my chest. Harmony, the same word they always used to justify silence, the word that had cost more than anything they'd said out loud. Ronan took the mic next. His speech was short, heavy on cliches. "She taught us strength. She taught us resilience. She gave us everything she had." And now, they were taking what was left. He cued the AV tech with a nod. "Let's roll the slideshow." I expected photos, music, more omissions. Instead, the screen flickered once, stuttered, and then a new video played. There was Marguerite, lying in her hospice bed, eyes sharp despite the frailty, speaking directly to the camera. "If Arlena is watching this, it means they tried to silence what I saved." The room froze. She continued, "Don't let them bully you into disappearing again. You were always the heir, not because of blood, but because of clarity." Vera stood abruptly, walking toward the laptop. This file wasn't," she fumbled, trying to pause it. Callista stared at the screen, lips parted, fingers still. Ronan muttered something under his breath, stepping forward. "Apologies, folks. Tech issues. That clip wasn't meant to be part of the program." But it was too late. I rose and walked to the front. I didn't touch the mic. I didn't look at them. "That's the first thing she said that all of you actually listened to." Then I sat back down. The video kept playing. Marguerite's voice softened. "I never gave you money, Arlena. I gave you a legacy. The keychain. The initials BSC. I spent years preparing, knowing you'd understand when the time came." The crowd shifted. Some whispered. Others avoided eye contact. A man in the back leaned forward in his chair. A woman clutched her purse tighter. The video faded to black. Nobody clapped. No one moved. I stood quietly and walked out. Outside, the air bit into my lungs. I leaned against the brick wall and just stood there. Not crying. Not angry. Just still. The silence felt honest for once. I pulled out my phone, opened a blank message to Geneva. "Proceed. Full audit. Full disclosure. I'm ready." Then I opened another thread and attached the video to a contact I hadn't spoken to in years, a financial journalist I'd met during a seminar in Chicago. The subject line read, "Ethics Story, Undisclosed Legacy Conflict." They wanted war in a whisper? I was giving them volume. I didn't do it to ruin them. I just stopped helping them hide. As I turned the corner toward my car, a figure stepped into the light near the side exit. Callista. Her posture wasn't rigid now. Her arms hung at her sides. Her eyes darted, searching. She mouthed something across the distance. "What else did she leave you?" I didn't answer. I didn't stop walking. The next morning felt quieter than it should have. No texts, no follow-ups, no apologies. Just the hum of the coffee maker and the light pressing through the blinds, as if it, too, wasn't sure how to enter the day. I hadn't slept much. After the memorial, everything shifted. There were no more illusions left to maintain. My family had finally said the quiet part out loud, and I had finally stopped listening with hope. By 9:30, a knock came to the door, punctual, no hesitation. A courier in a navy blue jacket held out a flat envelope with my name typed cleanly across it. Signature here, he said, handing me a clipboard. From Switzerland? I asked. He just nodded and turned back toward the elevator, already logging his next stop. I opened the envelope at the kitchen counter. Inside, a manila folder embossed with the mark of the Banque Suisse de Commerce. Below that, a smaller seal from a Swiss notary, dated 2003. My breath caught when I saw the signature at the bottom of the first document, Marguerite Chen. And under it, another name, Klaus Weber, her legal witness, and someone I'd only heard about in passing until now. The document was clean, official, notarized. It designated me as the sole beneficiary to her Swiss trust and all non-U.S. assets, effective immediately upon her death. The paperwork had been filed 20 years ago. She hadn't waited until the family fractured. She'd seen it coming before anyone else. I scanned the entire packet and uploaded it to my private legal archive. Then I emailed the PDFs to Rachel, my estate attorney, with a single line. Confirm compliance with all IRS requirements for foreign trust declarations. If anything's missing, tell me now. Rachel replied within an hour. Everything checked out. This was no secret, I said out loud to the empty room. It was just a silence no one wanted to look into. Later that day, I drove up to Boulder. Klaus Weber now lived in a retirement community near the base of the foothills. The building was modest, the kind of place where the lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and all the chairs were 2 inches too soft. Klaus met me in the community room. He was tall, thin, and his handshake was firm without trying to prove anything. You look just like her, he said as we sat down. She didn't say much about you, I replied. He chuckled. She said enough. I was only a facilitator, not a confidant, but I respected her immensely. I slid the document across the table. Did you really witness this? He looked it over and smiled gently. I did. She was very clear. She chose you not out of sentiment, but because you understood things differently than the others. She said you respected value, the kind that compounds. Not just in money, I added. He nodded. Especially not in money. He leaned back and looked out the window toward the mountains. She told me once, Arlena won't need to fight them. She'll simply outlast them. It wasn't a compliment. It was a prediction. I asked if he'd be willing to sign a public affidavit verifying the authenticity of the document. Without blinking, he said yes. On the way home, I thought about every birthday I spent sitting alone after they canceled last minute. Every holiday where I was busy with work, just to avoid being wallpaper in a room that didn't notice if I was peeling. None of that hurt the same now. It didn't stop hurting, but it stopped mattering. Because the thing about truth is, it doesn't always make noise. It just stands. Heavy, solid, unshaken. By evening, I was back at my desk, finishing up notes from my meeting with Klaus, when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I opened the message. Legal language. Sterile formatting. Attached was a court filing dated that morning. Motion for temporary injunction of foreign asset transfer. Petitioner, Ronan Chen. Basis? Mental competency concerns regarding the primary beneficiary. They couldn't take what was mine. So now they were trying to claim I wasn't. I didn't waste time responding to the court filing. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I printed it, circled the phrases mental instability and foreign asset transfer, and taped it to the wall above my desk. Then I opened my folders, physical and digital, and began preparing the kind of response that doesn't shout. It builds. I'd seen this coming. Maybe not this exact tactic, but the weaponization of perception had always been their forte. If they couldn't take what was mine, they'd try to make me look unfit to hold it. 3 days later, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by paper. Notebooks, statements, letters, receipts, even screenshots. Each one had a name, a timestamp, a purpose. Every file was part of a longer timeline I'd curated, like a mosaic no one asked for until now. I filed a countersuit. Defamation, inheritance interference, fraudulent asset access attempt, quiet, clinical, and sealed. I didn't notify the family. I let the papers do it for me. Served through official channels, not whispers over brunch. I submitted a formal request to the Swiss trustees to freeze any activity involving the Chen family name until the legal dispute was resolved. On the form, under primary parties of concern, I typed Callista Chen, Ronan Chen, and when asked for a statement of reasoning, I wrote only this: they made it public, I'm making it permanent. That same day, a message came in from the hospice administrator where Marguerite spent her final months. I'd requested her medical and financial records weeks ago, unsure if they'd be relevant. Now they were everything. The package included months of medication schedules, care team notes, and billing authorizations. Each page bore my signature. 7 months of coordination. Personal funds transferred to cover gaps Medicare wouldn't touch. Appointment summaries I'd signed in her stead when she was too tired to hold a pen. Tucked at the back was a scanned letter I hadn't seen before, handwritten by Marguerite, addressed to the facility director. If questions arise after my death, please be advised that I have asked Arlena Chen to remain my sole point of contact and executor of my decisions. This was done willingly, with clarity of mind and heart. I do not anticipate pushback, but I've learned that legacy stirs things in people that love never could. I read that line twice. While they were arguing over her china set, I was reading to her every night. I uploaded every page into my encrypted archive, created a subfolder, Hospice Primary Evidence. By early evening, I sat with a cup of tea, window open, listening to the wind drag leaves across the concrete outside. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I didn't need them to see what I'd done, or even understand why. That version of me, the one that needed acknowledgement, wasn't weak. She was just quieter. She observed instead of responded, measured instead of exploded. Silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's surveillance. My phone rang. It was Rachel, my attorney. "We received Ronan's team's response to your countersuit," she said, her tone clipped. "You'll want to see what they attached." I clicked the file in the shared folder while she spoke. It was a scanned affidavit, anonymous, typed on letterhead with no origin, signed by a concerned family acquaintance. The statement claimed that during Marguerite's final weeks, I had isolated her from the rest of the family, that I had pressured her into rewriting legal documents, and may have used medication to keep her docile. No name, no details, no timeline, just accusation cloaked as caution. "They think if it's whispered long enough, it becomes evidence," I said to Rachel. "Do you want us to move for dismissal?" she asked. "No," I replied. "I want them to keep going." "Why?" "Because they forgot something." I paused, eyes scanning the hospice documents again, stopping at the prescription logs, my initials beside every dosage logged by hand. "I kept receipts," I said. "Real ones." The statement was anonymous, predictable. No real signature, no origin, just accusations typed neatly in third person, trying to sound impartial. Sources close to the family believe Miss Chen exerted undue influence. It read like it had been copied from a textbook on manipulation tactics. I didn't throw it across the room. I didn't even roll my eyes. I printed it, slid it into a manila folder labeled Defense Fabrication Attempt 1, and clipped it behind a handwritten note from Marguerite, dated 3 months before her passing. "When someone fights with shadows," I murmured, "it's because their truth can't stand the sun." I didn't sleep much that night, but I wasn't restless. I was focused. Around 3 in the morning, I remembered something Grandma once said. Odd, even for her. "The real things never go through lawyers," she'd told me, adjusting the sleeve of her coat. "They stay with the body?" At dawn, I drove to the storage facility where I'd kept her things. The man behind the desk didn't recognize me, but the unit number rolled off my tongue like a password I'd never unlearned. It took 15 minutes to unlock the unit and another 5 to dig through the boxes. It was in the third box from the back, an old wool coat, navy blue with a satin lining. I pulled it from its plastic wrapping and ran my fingers along the seams, feeling for weight, for unevenness. I found the zipper pocket inside the lining, one I didn't remember being there. And there it was. A folded envelope, aged but sealed. I opened it slowly, breath held more from instinct than tension. Inside was a notarized letter, dated 6 weeks before her death. Handwritten, signed, witnessed, clear. She stated plainly that she was of sound mind and health, that no one coerced her, that no one else knew of the document's existence, that she had chosen me as her sole beneficiary, executor, and steward, not out of convenience or obligation, but trust. This was my doing alone, she wrote. I did not consult my family, nor was I persuaded. This is not a revision. This is a restoration. The wording was unmistakably hers. I scanned it at home, cropped it gently, and sent it to Rachel, my attorney. Then I uploaded a redacted version to my private blog. Not for anyone to read, necessarily, but because I wanted it to exist somewhere beyond whispers. For truth's record, not revenge's satisfaction. The next morning, I received a text. From Vera. I didn't know about this. I truly didn't. I thought you were just angry. I stared at the message longer than I expected. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on what felt right. I wasn't angry, I was exhausted. She didn't reply. Later that night, I went through the rest of Marguerite's boxes. I donated what was impersonal, knickknacks, blankets, books with notes only she could understand. But the coat? I hung that in my closet, untouched, unwashed. Some truths don't need broadcasting. They just need to survive long enough to be seen. Before I went to bed, I got another message, this time from Rachel. Callista's lawyer has requested mediation. Voluntary. I didn't reply right away. I let the words settle. Voluntary always means they're losing. I didn't answer Rachel's message that night. I stared at the word mediation on the screen like it had teeth. After everything they'd done, every whisper, every falsified document, every backdoor maneuver, they wanted to sit down at a table and act like we were just resolving a dispute. I didn't need closure. I needed distance. The next morning, I responded with 3 lines. I'll attend, on one condition. The silence ends here. The mediation was scheduled for the following Tuesday in a neutral office space downtown. The room smelled like printer ink and old carpet. The walls were covered in corporate art. Blurry trees and lakes meant to calm. Nothing about it calmed me. Callista arrived 10 minutes late. She wore beige. The kind of beige that screamed, "See? I'm harmless." Her attorney was younger than I expected, probably still practicing how to sit still in uncomfortable chairs. Rachel and I had reviewed everything beforehand. We weren't there to negotiate. We were there to document. The mediator, a woman with kind eyes and a clipboard, opened by saying, "This is a space for clarity, not conflict." I almost laughed. Callista cleared her throat. I think we can all agree this situation has gotten out of hand. I met her eyes. You forged documents. You had Ronan's assistant impersonate me. You attempted to declare me mentally incompetent in court. Callista flushed. That wasn't personal. We were just trying to... Protect what? I asked. A version of Grandma that only existed when she was useful to you? Her lawyer started to speak. Rachel cut him off. Let's not pretend this is a misunderstanding. You made calculated choices. This is your opportunity to retract them, formally and on record. The mediator nodded slowly, scribbling notes. Let's talk resolution. I leaned forward. I want one thing. Callista's hands curled slightly in her lap. I want a written public statement from each of you, submitted to the probate court and attached to the estate's file. You will acknowledge the forged access request, the false claims of instability, and the harassment over inheritance rights. Callista's mouth opened, then shut. If you're asking for an apology, I'm not, I said. I'm asking for facts, the ones you buried under stories. Her lawyer leaned toward her. This is better than what you'll get in court. Callista didn't speak. She just nodded once. The documents were filed 2 weeks later, sealed but admissible. They would never see a courtroom, but they'd sit in a folder somewhere with official stamps and case numbers, undeniable in black and white. A month after the mediation, I launched the workshop. It started as a small idea, something I scribbled in a notebook the night I found Marguerite's coat. I called it The Quiet Ledger. We held the first session in a community library conference room. 12 women showed up, some older than me, some younger. All of them had a story. A sister who drained the joint account. A son who borrowed retirement funds. A husband who rewrote wills in the hospital. A mother who gaslit her into signing away her share of the house. They didn't need sympathy. They needed language, framework, protection. I gave them that, one file folder and one strategy at a time. One woman came up to me after our third session. She held my hand tightly and whispered, "I thought I was crazy, but now I know. I was just being erased." I nodded. That's how they do it, quietly, until we get louder. I never told them my story, not directly. But the keychain stayed on my desk, still worn, still cold, still mine. Sometimes I'd catch one of the women staring at it, and I'd say, "It opens something most people can't see." That was enough. I didn't go to the next family gathering. I didn't send a card. I didn't check the group thread. They stopped messaging. And that was peace.